so that you can watch this back later. Let me see if that's actually happening. Yes, the recording has started. Let me see. Yeah, so just first, a few quick words from me. First of all, I want to say thank you so much, of course, for joining into Sarah's wonderful teacher training in collaboration with the Hot Yoga Club in Chico, which is so amazing. And for Sarah, is a dear friend of mine and also colleague. So super excited to do this together with her, although it's only a little part that I'm doing with you, but I'm sure you'll be in amazing hands with Sarah. She is an absolute wonderful, great teacher with so much incredible knowledge, and not only on like the physical part in yoga, like the asanas, but so much knowledge on the philosophy, and she will hopefully bring you a lot of depth in that sense also, and a beautiful journey. I've taught quite a lot of teacher trainings, and I have to say there has been no one ever that said, oh, this was just okay. You know, nobody really just says. Everybody is at the end of a teacher training. People go through something, and it's a really life-changing journey. So I hope that for you, I wish that for you also, to find something beautiful there for yourself as well. And at the end, what we're doing is we're light workers, and it's so beautiful that we can teach you to, again, then after this training, spread your light. And in that way, hopefully we can make this world a lot more beautiful. So again, thanks to Sarah, and thanks to Hot Yoga Club Chico also for trusting in me and for the collaboration. And Sarah, I don't know, I'm going to mute myself. Is there anything would you like to say something before we start? Let me just mute myself.
Mute. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Hopefully you can hear me okay. On my end, I'm using data. I'm on my phone. I don't normally use Zoom on my phone, but I have some miscellaneous things to do on these mornings. So I just want you to know I'll be jumping in at the beginning, and then I'll be with you through all of the sessions, but I'll likely turn my camera off and be working on other projects, some multitasking, but just to be present for the experience so that I can make sure that I'm able to support integrating Jane's knowledge into our training together. So that's really important to me. So I'll be present for these. Even if you don't see me, just know I'm around. You'll see my little picture. Other than that, I also want to thank Jane. I really appreciate doing this with her. I've been so inspired by Jane. We met 4 or 5 years ago on Bon Air, and yeah, it was just an instant connection. And since then, we have been working around and with each other in various ways. And so I feel really excited to start this collaboration, which I think will lead to much more. Jane has a beautiful story about her own transition in life, coming from working in a business world, a business landscape, in production and marketing with television programming, if I'm not misinformed on that. And so as a producer, she can tell you a little bit more about that, living a very normal, modern, fast-paced life, working and living in that way, and something changed in her and she wanted something more for herself. And she took a very big leap, selling her home in Amsterdam where she was living and transitioning to this global yogic lifestyle. And that's nothing short of incredible, because it takes insane amounts of bravery to give up consistency and stability and what we know from learning across our lifetimes and step into the total unknown of living this global yogic lifestyle. So not only is Jane this incredible source of knowledge, I've already shared that with you, but she also has this deep and meaningful path that she's followed that I think is something to inspire all of us. And so I'm really pleased that she's going to be sharing this with us. But as she said, she's on a Caribbean island. I know, because that's also, we actually live right next door to where Jane is living right now. So she can see our little tiny place from her house. And anyways, the internet can be unstable. And so I just encourage you to just forget about having an expectation about what things should be like. If you ever feel annoyed by it, use that as a practice. Use everything as a practice to develop your own capacity to withstand the ups and downs of everything, including internet connectivity. And then just enjoy the process and the experience. And yeah, love you so much, Jane. So glad to see you, and I miss you so much. And I can't wait to see you in person again. And yeah, just enjoy this wild ride with everyone. I'm going to turn my camera off now, but like I said, I'll be here.
Okay, welcome back. Let me just see, I'm just checking. Yeah, John says, I never expect much out of the internet anyways. That's a good reply. Yes, so welcome to the few new ones that arrived into the meeting, meaning that we're just one short. So hopefully this person will come soon. I still have to sort of get used to your names, of course, but that will come in the next weeks, hopefully. And yeah, just before we start, I just wanted to give also a little bit of an intro of myself, but then Sarah did most of that already. So thanks to Sarah. But yes, so I used to live in Holland. I am Dutch, and also meaning that maybe sometimes how I pronounce your name or how I pronounce some of the words might sound a bit funky to you. Forgive me for that if that happens. Because of course, yeah, I feel I speak quite good English, but I'm not like a native speaker, of course. And yes, so when I was 41, actually, I changed around my life, and I was working in advertising for a long time, 20 years, and especially those last 5 years in a big company, international company, and there was a lot of pressure and 24/7 always having to be there and being, available. And at some point it was just very, I was feeling like I want something else. I didn't really know what. And then, to cut a long story short, I actually went on a sabbatical, and first I went on a retreat actually, and that was my first yoga retreat, although I've been practicing yoga for 20 years or more. But during the retreat, I already found like, oh, I really like this and I'd love to do something with it. And then I took a sabbatical from my work, went to India, and did a teacher training just for myself, basically, because I thought I'm never ever going to dare to stand in front of a class and teach a class. But then as you're there and you're meeting all these like-minded souls and a lot of people that stepped out of the corporate world, and I thought, this is interesting. I can travel and I can teach yoga and earn some money, and yeah. And then I just decided I'm going to do it. So that's my story, and that's already been like six years, something like that, behind me. And I have lived in Thailand. I have lived in India. I've taught teacher trainings or assisted in teacher trainings in Thailand. I host my own teacher trainings and retreats in Spain, in the beautiful mountains there. And also in Holland, and did some things also on Bonaire. And now I am actually talking to Curacao to do some work there, and also in New York, maybe in September. So yes, when you put your energy into something, it starts to flow. And I encourage you all, if this is your path, if this is what you want to become a light worker, in whatever way, then yeah, trust. And it's not always easy. That's the most important thing to know also. It's definitely not always easy. And although I live in paradise now, it's not that my life is always paradise. So it's always ups and downs, just like a normal life. But I am very grateful for the life that I have. So thank you. Let's take a moment actually before we start and dive into the anatomy to center ourselves. So I don't know if you want, you're welcome to move yourself onto the floor on a mat or a blanket or a cushion. But if you don't want to do that, you can also just sit on a chair. That's totally fine as well. As long as when you're sitting on a chair, just make sure that you're not sort of leaning back and making it like being very lazy and a rounded spine, but make sure to sit up nice and right. So your back is away from the back of the chair, and you're really grounding down your sitting bones, and let both feet be also flat on the floor, touching the ground. And if it can be with bare feet, that would be great. That way we feel the earth a bit more. And of course, if you're wanting to sit on the floor, then please go ahead and take any comfortable seat, like Sukhasana, an easy cross-legged seat. But you can also sit on the shins and the heels, like the calves and the heels, if that feels better. And then when you're in your seat and you're comfortable, then just take a moment to close your eyes here. And as you close your eyes, and notice for a moment what happens. You shut off the world of looking and seeing. And you open up your internal vision. So as you're opening up that internal vision, you're bringing your awareness inside your body. And just to get ourselves into the present moment, before we start our lecture, we want to be present. We want the mind also to have this focus, this specific kind of focus. So quieting the mind before we start with the lecture is actually really nice, so that the mind doesn't want to take us away to other places in time, other times or other places. So just take a moment to really connect to the ground. And you can do that to just bring your full awareness into the parts of the body that are connected to the floor. And a connection to the floor can also be a block that you're sitting on, a cushion you're sitting on. It can be a chair that you're sitting on. Anything that makes connection with the ground, anything that gives you a certain feeling of stability and a foundation. Maybe you feel the sitting bones either on the floor or on the chair, parts of the legs into the chair or the floor, parts of the feet grounding down into the ground, into the earth. And just drop your total weight of the body into that connection with the floor. Now you let gravity pull you down towards the earth. And notice that when your awareness is with those points of the body that make connection to the ground, that it's almost like it pulls the energy out of your brain, out of your mind, into that lower part of the body. And letting that lower part of the body become really heavy. And hopefully you feel that sensation of heaviness, that grounding down, that really gives you a feeling of safety, of security, of foundation, meaning that you're also able to relax more into that foundation. And then from the heaviness of that lower part of the body, just let the spine, the torso be light. From the sitting bones, let the spine rise up towards the crown of the head. And the crown of the head a little bit more up towards the sky, towards the ceiling. Noticing that you create space in between the vertebrae, just like that. And then noticing for a moment the shoulders. Are the shoulders relaxed? If you're not sure, maybe you want to just circle the shoulders up towards the ears and then circle them back down. Depending on your seat, maybe the hands are in your lap, maybe the hands are resting on your thighs or on your knees. Let the arms be relaxed and the hands be soft. And letting the face also be soft here. No clenching of the jaws. No frowning between the eyebrows. Just relaxing here into the face. And then from this seat, I hope that although you have to keep yourself upright, you can also find some relaxation in the seat at the same time. Try to stay aware of, keep on pulling the spine out of the sitting bone, so we're not rounding in the lower back. The chest is nice and open so that there's space for the lungs to breathe. And then start to bring your full awareness towards the lungs right now, in towards that heart space, the lung space. Just start to breathe here, finding a nice rhythm of breathing. And maybe first, you like to notice how the breath is right now, without changing it. But in general, when we bring the awareness to the breath, we start to control it anyway a little bit. I'd like to invite you to actually bring even more control over the breathing. And start to inhale through the nose and exhale also through the nose, of course, and finding this equal rhythm, same length, inhale and exhale. If you're finding that control over the breath, finding that steady rhythm, maybe you want to count the length of the breath, inhaling for 4 and exhaling for 4. Or maybe you take 5 counts for the inhale and 5 for the exhale. Or maybe 3 counts, depending on what works for your body. Sometimes to count the breath makes it a bit easier to stay focused with the mind. Just a few more breath cycles like this. Let's start to take even a little bit more control. So whichever rhythm you were finding, maybe 4 counts for the inhale and 4 counts for the exhale, or maybe 5. See if you can bring a little pause in between the inhale and the exhale, holding the breath, and then also after the exhale, you hold before you inhale again. I don't really want to disturb your rhythm, so I'm not going to guide you through this because everybody will have a different length for their inhale or their exhale. But just try to find a rhythm of breathing where you inhale for a certain amount of counts, holding the breath for the same amount, exhaling for the same amount, and then holding again for the same amount. So you inhale, you hold, you exhale, and you hold. So I'm going to take I'm going to take 3 cycles of breath like this in my own rhythm. And then after those 3 cycles, I'll gently get us out and back into a normal rhythm again. So maybe you can also try to have about 3 breath cycles of these where you're holding in between inhale and exhale. So hopefully you completed your 3rd round by now also. And then just start with the eyes still closed. Start to just find a regular breath again, inhaling and exhaling through the nose. And know just when we find this steady rhythm, so the length of the in and the exhale are the same, and we're breathing in and out through the nose. we find this coherence with other systems in the body, like with the heart rate, with the nervous system, all helping to bring more relaxedness into the body. Now on your next regular inhale, just bringing the hands in front of your heart, hand palms together in Anjali Mudra. Bowing the head towards the heart. And then just let's take a moment of gratitude together here. Just think of something that you're grateful for this moment in your life. Or maybe you're grateful for all the beautiful things you have. Just sending out your gratefulness, your loving energy. And you can slowly on the next in-breath, open the eyes, lift up your heads. Namaste. So I hope that you feel nice and relaxed, and that you notice that when you start to really bring that awareness to your breath, that the mind becomes so much more quiet. I know that for you it's fairly early in the morning, so I hope that these sort of things don't make you too sleepy. We can always do something a little bit more awakening, energizing later on. I'm going to start with the lecture, but before you maybe turn off your camera, I just want to ask you one more thing. First of all, I'll just say about myself, I think I always had a thing for the human body. Like, I really find it so interesting how the human body works. And the more you learn about it, I find that it's just so incredibly amazing what the body does for us the whole day. There's so many things going on that we don't realize. Basically, the body is always there trying to find balance for us and trying to keep us healthy. And I first learned my first part of anatomy during a study that I did for acupuncture, a traditional Chinese medicine. But then I didn't finish that study, unfortunately. Then I sort of rolled into advertising and I went into a whole different world. But I did really finish that first part, which was the anatomy part. And then, of course, after some time, you forget again. And then I did my 200-hour teacher training. And then everything sort of came back because I had to go through everything again. And then I did my 300-hour teacher training. And that's actually when really things started to stick into my brain. So I just wanted to say this, that it's not that I expect of you that when you hear these things about anatomy, especially if you haven't learned anything about it yet, if you don't know anything about it yet, then it can be quite overwhelming and a lot of information. But don't stress yourself out. You'll take from it what is most important for you, I find. And also, after this, you might be doing another training where you again pick up some things, or you might rewatch sometimes. Like these lectures, for example, or you read more books, and then little by little it will come and it will stick to you. And it also depends on whether what kind of feeling you have with it. Like, I really am into the human body more than, like, for example, into the philosophy of yoga. I love the philosophy as well, but I am definitely more somebody that is focused on more like the physical body and the effects that yoga has for the physical body, a little bit more maybe than the whole spiritual part, if that makes sense. So you're going to be your own teacher in this. You're going to find what works for you, and it's not wrong or right. And that's why it's great that there are so many yoga teachers, because in that sense, then you all have something different to offer to your students also. So know that it's a lot of info, but don't stress out. And if you're only hearing this for the first time, then it might be like, oh my God, it's so much. But it'll come, and at some point also it'll stay. So before I actually go into the lecture, I just wanted to know, is there anyone that actually already has done like an anatomy training? Is there anyone that is maybe a physiotherapist or a nurse, or maybe you want to raise your hand? Let me see. Tasha, you want to tell me why did you learn anatomy? Maybe you can unmute yourself for a moment. And hello, by the way. Hi. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. I'm so glad to be here. I'm a registered dental assistant and also a medical assistant. So I worked for many years in the clinic doing I mostly worked peds on the weekends because I was doing dental during the week. So I did get a good feel for that. And I'm also very intrigued by the human body. I do a lot of study on the endocannabinoid system and the unlocking of it with the sacred plant cannabis. And I do a lot of work with people on that. So I'm really intrigued by it. And I really love studying that sort of thing on my spare time.
Nice. Thank you. And
Yeah,
Carrie, I
thank
think you said also you did some anatomy before. You mentioned, I think, also that you're an anatomy nerd, right? Or was that not you?
I think that was Katara.
Oh, yeah, that's Katara. Yeah, that's true. Oh, yeah, true.
But I did take an AMP anatomy physiology course for nursing school, but it's been 13, 14 years.
Okay. So hopefully things will slowly maybe then come back as you're going through this. Yeah.
It was magnificent. I love it. Just like you. Yeah. Totally
nice.
Intrigued and fascinated by it.
Yes. Nice. Anyone else? No. And Katara, you just are an anatomy nerd, but have you done any training, or is it just you're very intrigued by it? Just intrigued. Oh, you have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I have. I went to midwifery school years ago.
Yeah.
And I've taken maybe 2 years of anatomy at like university level. And I also teach. I'm a midwife teacher. I teach, I train midwives, and I also teach body work. And so I teach anatomy before.
Oh, great.
And I've loved dissection classes and like working in private labs and stuff.
Yes.
I've been lucky to do that a few times. Yeah. So
wow, that's great. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know Gil Headley?
I do know Gil. Yeah. Have you studied with him?
No, but I'm looking at his pictures and on his website and things like that. Yeah.
I just took a dissection class with Tom Myers.
Yeah, also heard from him.
He's doing those online dissection classes, which are so good. So
nice. That's a real anatomy nerd. Yes. Okay, thank you. No, sorry, are you muted? This is good. Yeah, so just also for those who have had anatomy classes before, then I can imagine that some of these things might also become a bit boring for you because you've heard it all before, but I ask you to stay open, and yeah, hopefully there is some things that are new to you maybe, and maybe actually there's some things that you can add that you know to me, which I always loved it as well. I mean, we say as yogis, we're always a student. Yeah, because I've had it before where there was a physiotherapist, for example, that would join my teacher training. And then once we were done with talking about bones and muscles, they were like, oh my God, thank God for this, because for them it was so much repetition. And I understand that, but I would say just take it in, and just also maybe it's like what Sarah said before, like use those kind of things when you're feeling a little bit like, oh, I'm annoyed because I already know all of this. Then use that as a practice to maybe just let those feelings come over you as well. But I hope that there will be a lot of new things and a lot of inspirational. I try to link a lot also to the yoga, so I hope that will keep it a little bit, hopefully still interesting for you. And otherwise, let me know. I'll give you some extra assignments or something that I can think of. Okay, so I'm gonna start to share my screen. We'll take another 25 minutes of lecture now, and then we'll have a little break, of course, and then you can walk around. So maybe it makes sense for you for now to turn off your camera. So maybe that will keep the internet connection a little bit better. And what I do is every now and then I'll just come in back because I put myself on speaker view also for the recording, meaning that when I'm recording it, that you just see me and my slides. So that's nice if you're going to watch it back. If for some reason my AirPods, because sometimes they do that, they disconnect or something, you can always message me in the chat. I can see that still comes up, even though I just see myself. And what else? I will every now and then come back to you and say like, okay, are there any questions? So I hope that makes sense. I'm just gonna pin myself then for a moment. Yes, and I'll start sharing my screen. So let me see. I just want to make sure that's for the recording, also for you to watch it back, that you actually have everything that's neat. Okay, so there we go. So the first question, so I asked you to answer me this in the chat in a moment, is why is learning anatomy important for a yoga teacher? And just so you know, just to be sure, so anatomy is basically the study of the structures of the body. So the study of the bones, the muscles, the organs, where is everything situated in the body. And then the physiology is actually about the study about how does the body work, how does it function. Yeah, so those two, that's the difference between anatomy and physiology. And maybe you can write to me in the chat for a moment and tell me, please, why is learning anatomy important for a yoga teacher? I'd love to see what you think about that. So let's see if anything comes in. Sometimes it takes a bit of time to come through. Sarah is saying safety. Yes, for sure. Very important one. Let's see if anything else comes up. Avoid and help with injury. Yes. Ooh, it's weird. I have these lines on my. Let me see if I just did that. I don't know. Or maybe did somebody else do this? No, it's very strange. I all of a sudden have these lines on my slide. I wonder if you see that as well. Let me see what else. Sam is saying it helps add depth to that we experience in our body, to what we experience in our body. Yes. Katara, the importance of mechanics and connection between movements of muscles is everything. Students may ask questions about certain body parts and functions. Cassie is saying helps understand where the individual body limits are and how to learn how to work and heal them. John, to understand sequencing, opening up body areas through poses in a particular order. Yes, yes, they're all beautiful answers. So I'll just go to the next slide and see. Yeah, this is really strange. I'm going to, I don't know, let me just, Lindsay's saying the science between how the body works in relation to what we feel when practicing yoga. Yes. So I don't know why I have these lines. So I'm just going to stop sharing for a moment. Sorry, excuse me. And I'll do it again and see if where those lines were coming from. No, that's annoying. Give me 1 second. Yes, there we are. Yes, so I think now it's gone. So I don't know what that was. I don't know if you saw that, those weird green lines, but they're gone. So that's good. So you all gave great answers. I see one more in the chat. Let me just see. Tasha is saying we are guiding people in their body. We need to know the language to do so. Yes, exactly. So it's a lot about safety. It's a lot about like what do we feel, protecting the body when the body is injured. How can we modify? Also the cueing, and also if you're sequencing towards a specific pose, for example, you want to know like which parts of the body do you open, which parts do you need to warm up. So this is giving you a little overview. Why is learning anatomy important for a yoga teacher? So safety, preventing injuries, but also if somebody has an injury and they come to you, then you know how to work around it, hopefully. It helps with cueing, of course. Also to understand alignment, modifications for poses. So if we know in a certain pose what muscles do we want to stretch or strengthen, then we also can find maybe an alternative pose if the pose that we want people to do is not working for them. And to theme classes as well. And muscle groups or part of the body can be a theme for a class if it's like a more physical, if it's more, how do you say, like connected to the body, your theme. So just before we actually really dive into the anatomy, I want to explain a few things. I think it's important that we realize this. What I'm giving you as an anatomy teacher is a sort of a map, right? I'm giving you a map to the body. And I think that's what we're all trying to give you when we're teaching yoga in whatever way, when we're teaching asana, when we're teaching meditation, when we're teaching pranayama. Yeah, and we're trying to give you a sort of a guide. And what's important for me to realize for you is that when you get a map, it's just a representation. It's there to help us. It's not the actual 100% full truth. And please know that there are various maps on the same area, on the same thing. There are more roads that lead to Rome. And at the end, we look at what is useful for us. Which map do we use? And I'd always take this example, and you can follow my mouse indicator, which I think you should be able to see. And if you don't see it, please let me know, but I think you should be able to see it. When you look at the map on the left side, you see the map of Europe, and you see these wind directions. It has also Spain on there. So there is this Spain, and also Malaga area is right here. But it's a bigger map, and it's showing you the wind directions. So this would be useful for somebody that's going on a sail trip. And they want to know, how am I going to get from England all the way to Spain, for example, and is there enough wind? The same area here, Spain, is showing you the mountain ranges. So if you are going to hike and you want to hike in the mountains, then you'll need this map. It's the same map as the one on the left. But if you're looking for yoga classes in Malaga, in the city of Malaga, then you use this map, which is actually this little part down here in the south of Spain. And then you would use this map. So they're all covering the same area, but they're all showing you something different. And I think it's so important that we realize this, that when we learn things, that there are more roads that lead to Rome, and that we are just trying to give you our map. Sarah will give her map to you, and I'm giving you my map, and things will maybe cross, like will lay on top of each other perfectly, but other things might also be a bit contradictory, and maybe you learn something from me, and then from someone else they say it's slightly different, or they have a whole different theory. And specifically when you're talking about things that are a little bit more open to different interpretations, like philosophy or like energy work, yeah, there are definitely more theories on the same thing. So I guess for anatomy, it's a little bit less, but still, there's always also new research. So yeah, keep an open mind. Also very important is that, of course, we have these anatomy books, and you have your manual as well, with the anatomy part in it. And yeah, you see, I'm just trying to get like a picture here, for example. When you look at this, you see all these sort of models of the human body. And again, it's important that you realize that a model is, again, just a representation. It's not the actual thing. And it's not 100% the truth. Never forget that anatomy models are an average. When they made these models, they cut open 100 bodies more or less, and they took the average of 100 femur bones, And then they said, this is sort of the average length and thickness and how it looks. So this is our average femur bone or sacrum or humerus bone or whatever. And that also goes for muscles and things like that. And just know that we are not average. Everyone is different. We are all 100% unique. So, and that's also our bodies are 100% unique. Our skeletons are 100% unique. So please always stay also open-minded and curious, because there's always this new and updated research. There's always more to learn. And I love this quote by Paul Grilly, who is a famous yoga teacher, specifically famous for his yin yoga. Never is never right, and always is always wrong. And I love that because it's so true. Important, we are not building blocks or Lego blocks. Our body is not like that. And in anatomy models, everything is separated. You see it again, like when you look at, for example, how the picture of the abdominal muscles, it's all like cut separately. And also when you look at bones, let me see if I have bones and ligaments here for you as well. And you see that it's all like, it's like Lego blocks. Everything is sort of separated from each other and it's cut away from the tissues around it. Well, that is not how it is in the human body. So in the human body, everything is connected. One tissue basically becomes the other, becomes the next tissue. And I love to look at it as if you would look at a rainbow. When you look at a rainbow, you can see the red and the orange and the yellow, but you don't see, when somebody asks you, where does the red stop and the orange begin? You don't really see that. That's not exact, because it's sort of fused. It's sort of growing into each other. And that's how it is with the body as well. So we are just like the rainbow. Everything is connected. And just to show you that we are all different, please just take a look at these three sacrum bones and you see it. They're completely different. The one on the left is much longer. The one in the middle is a lot wider. The one on the right a lot smaller. And this will affect their range, can affect their range of motion depending on how the femur bones are connected, how the hip bones are connected to the sacrum, for example. So of course the femur bones would be connected into the hip bones, but it's all when how everything is connected and how the shape of the bones is will make a difference on how our yoga practices. So I'm just going to continue for a bit. If I go too fast or if there's anything, then please remember that you can just write me a little message in the chat also. But after a little bit of time, I will again check in with you and see if there are any questions. Yes. So when we talk about anatomy, we have to start somewhere. We have to be clear on how do we explain to someone else where in the body we can actually find this certain bone or muscle or organ. And also we talk in a specific language, basically, a specific vocabulary, an anatomical terms, on to be clear about that we are all on the same page. And when we want to talk about where in the body do we find something, we need everybody to understand that we're always looking at the body from a certain perspective, basically, and that is this. That is what we call anatomical position. And you can see it, feet, it's almost like a Tadasana, like a mountain pose. Maybe in mountain pose in general, we would have the feet touching, and depending on which yoga style you're practicing, the hands are maybe not open towards the front, like that, but then they would be facing, the hand palms would be facing the thighs, basically, or the upper thighs. So this is your anatomical position, and yes, it makes sense. No, when at least when we know everything, the body is always like this. When we talk about a certain muscle, for example, specifically in the arm, because when we're talking about it, when the hand palms are forward, then of course the front of the arm is something different than when you would have the hand palms facing the back, for example. So that's why we always want to look at the body from this point as we start to talk about where things are situated inside the body. And then we have some anatomical terms that we use. And I guess for the native English speakers, this is actually fairly easy. I find when I teach this in Europe, people are a little bit more like, they have to get used to some of the terms. But I think that for you, probably it's already sort of in your language, but still. So when you talk about the body and you say that something is superior in the body, it is either towards the head or it's above something else. So it's going towards the head or above something else inside the body. And when it's inferior, it is below something else or away from the head. So my feet are inferior to my belly, for example. My shoulders are superior to my belly. Then anterior and posterior. So when we're talking about anterior, we're talking about something that is towards the front of the body. So like my chest or my forehead. Something that is posterior is towards the back of the body. So my shoulder blades are more posterior compared to my chest. So posterior, back towards the back of the body, anterior towards the front of the body. And then ventral and dorsal are sort of the same things. And when something is ventral, it's on the front of the body. So you could say that your kneecap, your patella is ventral. It's on the front of the body. And dorsal is something that's on the back of the body. So my shoulder blades would be dorsal location. Medial is either on the midline of the body or towards the midline of the body. And lateral means that it's either away from the midline of the body or completely to the outside of the body. So medial, midline, lateral, away from the midline. Then superficial, meaning that it's towards the skin. So it's quite close to the skin. And when we're thinking about something that's deep, then it's away from the skin and it's inside the body. So thinking about, for example, the internal organs, they lie deep compared to, for example, your rectus abdominis muscle, which is the muscle that's your six pack, so to say. Proximal, meaning that it's close to the trunk or the midline. And distal means that it's away from the trunk or the midline of the body. So, for example, my hands and feet are distal compared to my heart. And my heart is very proximal because it's close to the midline of the body, and the hands are away from the midline. And then some other words, other vocabulary that we use also for the body can be hyper or hypo. When we're talking about something that's hyper, it's like there's too much of something. And for hypo, there's too little. Prone, supine are words that we use and tend to use that also in some of the names with in yoga postures as well. Prone, meaning that we're lying with our nose towards the floor. And supine would be like with the face upwards, like in Shavasana. And then something that's infra is more below, and something that's supra is above. Thinking a little bit of superior and inferior here. If that is not clear, if there are any questions on this, please give me a shout in the chat. And then I'll continue to the next slide. So we have the idea now of the places in the body, like how do we indicate certain places in the body? And we also want to talk about movements of the body. And also when we're talking about movement, we also go from this anatomical position. What is important though to realize is that, of course, in general, when we are moving, we are not always coming from an anatomical position. So sometimes it can be a little bit more tricky to think like, oh, how would you call this? Would it be internal rotation or external rotation? Say, for example, the arms in a downward dog. So that is something that you'll have to get used to as you're going through the training and thinking about the movements that you're doing as you're going through your different postures. But I'm sure that Sarah will also tap on that, or otherwise we'll talk together about it and make sure that that you get a little bit more of knowledge on that as well. But we have a little assignment as well for you to start to practice a little bit with that. So I am actually going to make my screen a bit bigger. Or no, let me just do it like this. Actually, that's better. I'm just going to stop for a moment here. And then I'm gonna put myself, I'll stop sharing. And I'll just put myself on full screen. That's nicer for the recording. And I'm just gonna turn myself around. So I prepared a little bit more space over here so that you can actually see me while I'm standing. And then I can explain a little bit more about the different movements of the body. You get to see a little bit of the Caribbean Sea here as well. So let me see. Yes, you can see me like this. So when we're talking about movements in the body and we're talking about flexion and extension, for example, when you're talking about flexion, we are actually making the angle in the joint smaller. And when you're thinking about extension, you're making the angle in the joint bigger. So when we're just thinking about, for example, the elbow, if I'm just in an anatomical position, that would be like this, and I'll just show you from the side. This is the angle of the joint here. So this is flexion. I'm flexing my elbow, and the angle of the joint becomes smaller. And then this would be extension. You can see the angle of the joint becomes bigger. So talking about flexion or extension, I always like to see it like this. In general, you could say that when we're flexing into the body, we're basically really curling up into this little ball. We're almost flexing every single joint in the body here. And extension is when we're extending backwards, opening the body again. Yeah, so flexion is making the smaller, the joint, the angle. Extension is making it bigger. So flexion into that little ball, and extension is like bringing everything towards back, opening. Then we have abduction and adduction. Abduction is when we bring limbs like arms and legs away from the midline. So here we're abducting away from the midline. And adduction is when we bring arms, legs back to the midline again. And so now I'm moving arms and legs lateral, so away from the midline, and that's abduction, and this is adduction. And also like when I'm crossing, so like for example in an eagle pose, this would be adduction, adduction, like bringing everything together, or even crossing over the midline. Then we have internal and external rotation, and that can also be called medial or lateral rotation. So if I'm standing in a mountain pose or in a Tadasana, then internal rotation is when I'm rotating inwards in towards the midline. So that's why I would call this medial rotation. Medial rotation, I'm bringing the foot in, so to say. And of course, I'm moving this from the hip. So the whole leg is moving inwards towards the midline. Yeah, medial rotation. Lateral rotation, away from the midline. External rotation. Let me see, what else do we have? Yeah, circumduction. Circumduction is basically when I'm drawing a circle. We can do that with certain joints only. I can do it with my hip as well, with my leg, my arm, my shoulder. So that's circumduction. I'm drawing a circle. And then we have some specific areas in the body that have specific joints in the body that have a different, a little bit of a different sort of movement that they can do. So let's start with the pelvis, for example. And the pelvis does tilting. With the pelvis, we can do a lateral tilt, meaning that we're sort of tilting to the side. Okay, you see, I'm tilting my pelvis here, and that is a lateral tilt. Now, the pelvis also tilts forwards or backwards, and in general, people tend to think that this is a backward tilt because we're sticking our butt towards the back. But actually, this is a forward tilt. So this is an anterior tilt. Why? Because when we're looking at the tilting, we look at the hip bones. And we look at it from the hip bone. So when I'm pressing my hip bones forward, I'm sticking my butt out, but the hip bones are going forward. When the hip bones are going forward, it means a forward tilt, an anterior tilt. When I bring the hip bones in towards the back, I'm tucking my tailbone under. So a lot of people also tend to call it like that, tuck the tailbone under. Then I am bringing the pelvis into a backward tilt, posterior tilt. Yeah, so we have lateral tilting, we have an anterior tilt, and a posterior tilt. Yeah. The hands, with the hands, we can do pronation. So the hand palms are flat on the floor or flat down, like facing down, or we can supinate. And my anatomy teacher in the first training that I did, yoga training that I did, 200 hours, she always says, to remember this, just think of a bowl of soup. You're holding a bowl of soup, and that's why we call it supination. So supination, pronation. The feet, I'm going to show that in a moment. The shoulder blades. Let's do the shoulder blades for a moment. So the shoulder blades, they also have certain movements that they can do. And I'm just bringing my arms forward now. So I'm like this. And then the shoulder blades can either retract. So you bring the shoulder blades together. They're basically kissing each other almost. Or you can protract. And now I'm bringing the shoulder blades away from each other. I hope that's clear. Retraction, pulling the shoulder blades together. Protraction, we're broadening the shoulder blades away from each other. Yeah. And then we can also lift them, elevate them, or depress them, moving them down. So elevation of the shoulder blades. I hope you can see it with my hair. Elevation and depression, bringing them down. Elevate, depress, retraction, protraction. Yeah, that's the movement of the shoulder blades. Now, remember that the shoulder blades don't move just like two things up, down, sideways. They're not like that. They're more like swinging a little bit, swaying. The feet. Now, I hope that you can see that. When basically we funny enough, we call pointing and flexing, it's actually both called flexion somehow in anatomy, but it has a different word in front of it. So when we're plantar flexing, we're flexing the back of the foot. And that is, and I like to sort of remember that as we have to point the foot is the same as plantar flexion. Yeah, so pointing is plantar flexion. And when I'm pulling my feet, my toes in, then this is called dorsiflexion. Dorsiflexion is pulling the toes in towards you. Plantar flexion is pointing the toe. And yeah, please remember that I'm not sort of giving you these terms because I expect you that when you're teaching yoga that you're going to use these terms. But I do feel as we're giving you the basics of anatomy that it's important that you understand and you know these terms. Not that you're in a class and you specifically have to say to your students, now plant or flex your foot or your feet, because they probably have no idea what that is. So you will be using the more common words, but I think because this is an anatomy course, I'd like you to understand the actual anatomical terms. Then we have eversion and inversion. So when we're doing inversion, that's talking about the feet also, you're basically bringing the feet in towards the sole of the foot in towards the midline. Yeah, so this would be inverting. And to evert is to bring the foot outward. So now we're bringing the pinky toe more out and up. That makes sense. And I can also, of course, do that if I would be seated. And I hope you can still see me. Yeah, you should be able to see me. So here I am inverting, and here I am everting. So when we are in butterfly pose, when we are in Baddha Konasana, we are inverting the feet. Yeah. Let me see if there's anything that I forgot that I still need to show you. No, that's it. Okay, I'm just gonna turn you back around again. And then I see that it's already 8 past 9 on your end. So let me just put you on gallery view for a moment and just check in with you if there are any questions on this so far. And I know that you all have your cameras off, but maybe if you have a question, you might want to just put your camera on and let me know, or write it in the chat. And if everything is clear, then that is a thumbs up. Just give you a little second to see if anybody is coming. Thank you, Katara. Yeah, all thumbs up. Yay. Yeah, John has found and Cassie, they found the little thumbs up that you can actually give in the screen. That's also great. Thank you, guys. Okay, so I then want to give you a little break. And I think it's probably nice if you have a 10-minute break so that you can either drink something, move around, as I mentioned in the email already, like walk around a bit and move a little bit so that you get your yang on. And then we'll get back in 10 minutes. So let's get to back together at 20 past exactly, please. Okay, see you later. I'll mute myself, my video off. Okay, and so we are back. Maybe for a moment you can turn on your camera. It's weird just looking at all your, like these, I see these dark squares with just your name. But I would love to just see you for a moment, especially since it's still early morning for you. And of course, you're trying to concentrate and focus. I hope that it's going well for you. But let's just, oh, Sarah, you're nursing. Oh, let's just give ourselves a little bit of a wake up. And that's something that you can actually use during your training whenever you feel like you need to get a bit of energy. And that's actually really nice technique is what we call tapping. And you have these a cappuccino or coffee cup points, and they're sort of right here below the clavicles. And just notice for a moment when you start to just tap yourself, and don't do it too hard, but do it in a way that still feels good, and also not too light. So I'm really feeling it. Like I'm tapping myself, and you're starting to create some energy that will start to flow in your body. And you can also tap a little bit more onto the sternum and a little bit more to the side. I also actually like it to tap my face and tap under my eyes. You can tap on your forehead as well. You can even tap on your skull. And I'm not sure if you're feeling it, but for me, it always works pretty intense. Like I start to feel that there's a lot of energy starting to flow in the body. You can, and especially these coffee cup points. So just a little bit like here under the collarbones, next to the sternum. Just take a few more breaths. Just tap yourself. Beginning of thinking, what am I doing? This is weird. But it helps. At least I find it does. Rah, and then just shake it out. Let it go. Woo! I feel energy. I don't know if you feel it. I feel energy. Okay, so you're welcome to turn off your camera again. And we'll have another, 40 minutes, 35 minutes of lecture. So, I mean, this time we didn't get to talk maybe so much about so many things, but then of course, next time when we don't have all the introduction and stuff, it will go, we'll dive a bit quicker into it straight away. So please, maybe you want to just turn off your camera so that we make sure that the internet connection stays stable. And I'm just gonna, while you're doing that, I'm going to share my screen with you. So you have this in your manual as well, on the anatomy part of the manual. That's on page 5. You have these pictures as well. So if you're a little bit like not sure about those movements of the body yet, then just take a look at those. At these pictures that I have there for you. You were gone for a moment, so I think that had to do with my internet connection. Hopefully, it will be okay again. Really strange. I am going again to, let me see. I'm going to share my screen again with you. Where do I go here? Yes. Okay. So just in case that didn't go right before, I have these pictures in the manual for you. And it is on page 5. You have these pictures. So here you can see those movements of the body, these different movements, flexion, extension, all the other things. Let me see. Yes. Then there is one more thing that we need to talk about when we're talking about certain movements. You have these planes of movement in the body, basically. And you have the frontal plane, the coronal plane, and that's the plane that is dividing the front of the body from the back of the body. And movement here in this plane would be movement like abduction, where I abduct my arms away from my body. Yeah, so this is, I'm laterally moving my arms instead, and now I am medially moving my arms. So adduction is Guys, I am sorry, I don't know what's happening. I have the feeling that I might want to maybe just restart my Zoom. I'll give it one more try and see if I don't need to restart it. That would be easier, because otherwise everybody would need to log in again. So I rather try one more, and now fingers crossed, third time, maybe it'll stay okay. So give me 1 second. I'm just going to make sure that I have the presentation up. Yes. Let's see. Sharing screen. There we go again. Hopefully it will go okay. Fingers crossed. I think myself, I have to just make sure that everything is in the right order for the recording as well. Yes. Okay, so I was talking about the planes of movement, and the frontal plane is dividing the front of the body and the back of the body. And the movements that we have in that plane is abduction, adduction. You can think of that also with the fingers, abducting and adducting, and the same with the legs. So we're moving towards the side, so to say. The sagittal plane is the plane that divides the right side of the body to the left side of from the left side of the body. And the movements that we will do there is, for example, like a forward fold. So it is flexion, like flexion from the hips, flexing all the way forward, and extension when we move towards the back. And then we have the transverse horizontal plane. And that's the plane that is actually cutting like right through the body in a horizontal way. And the plane of movement there is rotation, twisting. And that can also be, of course, rotation internally and externally, rotation with the arm or the leg, not just the spine. So I hope that that is clear. And so this is just, again, showing you this in words, but I've also written it down. It's also on your manual on page 5 as well, just to be sure that it's clear for you. And now I have a little assignment for you, which we will do next week. And I always really love this one because it's funny. And you're probably just going to laugh a lot about me trying to get into a posture from anatomical position. And you're going to cue me into the pose from Tadasana. Yeah, so I'm in anatomical position, hand palms forward. And you're going to cue me into a posture, and we probably don't have time to let everybody do it, but I do want everyone to prepare 2 yoga poses, and you can just write it down on a note. So you can read from your note as you're cueing me into the poses. You have a whole week to look at this, and you may always text me if you're not sure. If you have any questions, but the idea is that you do 2 postures. Why? Because otherwise everybody maybe might choose the same posture, and then it's not fun. No, so if everybody has 2 poses, then at least if one posture was already done, then hopefully the other one can do another pose. And we'll try to do as many as we can. You'll be cueing me into the pose next week. And just to give you an idea, when you think about, and I'll maybe just turn myself around for a moment, I'll give you a little bit more clear on this. Make myself a little bit bigger here, also for the recording. So of course, here I am in an anatomical position. Just going to show you from the side. So if I'm coming into a chair pose, and I won't go into the whole pose, but just to give you an idea of where you would start to cue, you would be cueing that I would need to flex in my hips, and I would need to flex in my knees, and I would need to flex my ankles, and I'm basically, and that would be a dorsiflexion of the ankles, and I'm bringing my buttocks lower to the ground. And then you could think of, what do we do with the arms, for example? Well, I am going to flex the arms up. A lot of people think that this is extension, but this is actually flexion. Extension would be towards the back. Yeah. But then my hands are actually forward. So then you have to think about, what do I need to rotate to bring the hand palms together? So that is the assignment. I hope that that is clear. And otherwise, before we finish in a moment later on, you need a bit more guidance on this, then let me know. But yeah, so please prepare this for next week. We'll do that on Saturday, the 9th of April, and please prepare 2 postures. And don't worry, you don't have to do it from your head, just write it down on paper. So it's a little assignment to get used to, how do you cue using anatomical terms. Probably after this, you will never use those anatomical terms again as you're teaching, but it's a good practice. Yes. Okay, so then let's really start to talk a little bit more about our amazing body. So our amazing body is built out of cells, trillions of cells. And I'm just going to explain you a little bit like how from one cell we go to a whole system. So just like matter is built out of atoms, it's the building, atoms are the building block of matter. Cells are the building blocks of biological life, of our body. And I love this picture actually of the human cell. This is a picture that recently sort of showed up on I think it was, I saw it somewhere on social media, but it was very detailed, very, very beautiful. I think it's a piece of art. I'd actually like to have this on my wall. Pretty nice. So we have around 37 trillion cells vibrating in our body right now. It's something that you can't even comprehend when you think about it, about that amount. And all these cells, they create 4 basic tissue types. So there's only 4 basic tissue types, and those 4 basic tissue types, they create 11 organ systems. So all of those parts together, so those tissue types, the 11 organs, they create our amazing human body. And we're going to go into talking about many of the systems and talking about many of the tissues as well. So we have these cells that have a specific function. And when they have the same function, they basically create a tissue, a certain kind of tissue, a tissue with a certain function. And then these tissues with a specific function, they create an organ. And then organs together create a body system. Think of our digestive system, for example. Here, showing you a little bit more in detail. So you have the cell here on the left side. And if these cells have a specific function like that, like the function that, for example, what the liver, for example, does for us, like cleaning the blood in the body. So these cells have this function, they create here this tissue. So this is already a lot of cells together here. They create that tissue, and then all that tissue together will create the liver. And then the liver is part of a system, which is our digestive system. which you see on the picture in the middle below. And then all the systems together and all the tissues together, they create what is the human body. So the four basic tissue types that we have is we have this connective tissue, epithelial tissue, muscle tissue, and nervous tissue. Connective tissue supports other tissues and it binds them together. When you think of that and you know a little bit about the body, then the first thing maybe that comes to mind is fascia, right? Because fascia is like this bodysuit that we have and it just contains everything inside. But then we have ligaments that keep bones together, that connect bones. We have tendons that connect muscle to bone. Cartilage is our connective tissue. Bone is connective tissue. Blood is actually connective tissue. And lymph tissues are also connective tissue. And then we have the epithelial tissue. And they provide this covering. And for example, when you think about covering, you think, of course, mostly about the skin. It's a big organ, actually, the skin. It's huge. It's basically the biggest organ almost that we have. And then, but also think about the linings of various passages inside the body, like the passage where our food passes through, or where when we are breathing, we breathe through the trachea. And that's also, it has this covering, and that is epithelial tissue. Then we have muscle tissue, and that includes voluntary muscles that move the skeleton. But it also includes a smooth muscle, like muscles that are surrounding the stomach or the intestines. And then we have also cardiac muscle tissue. That's the heart muscle. Then we have nerve tissue. And nerve tissue is made up of neurons, of these nerve cells. And this tissue is used to carry messages to and from various parts of the body. Brain and the spinal cord outward into the body, but then also the sensory nerve cells will bring information back to that. And of course, we'll be talking about these systems a lot more further along the way. This is just showing you the different types, the tissue types. You see a little bit that there's also quite a difference in how the cells are structured. And specifically also this nervous tissue looks so different. The cells are really funky shaped. And then those four basic tissue types, they create all these systems in the body. And we have 11 systems in the body. We have the skeletal system, the bones and the joints, the muscular system, muscles, fascia, connective tissue, the nervous system, brain, spinal cord, nerves and nerve cells, the respiratory system, our lungs, trachea, diaphragm, the circulatory system, cardiovascular system, the heart, the arteries, the veins, the lymphatic or immune system, the lymphatic vessels, it contains the lymphatic vessels and the nodes. Digestive or excretory system is the mouth, esophagus, stomach, intestines, actually the whole tract where our food passes through. The endocrine hormone system, the urinary system containing kidneys and bladder, and of course the hormone system contains all our different glands. The reproductive system is the sex organs, and then the exocrine integumentary system, which is skin, hair, nails, and our sweat. So 11 systems, and we don't talk about all systems in a lot of detail. Some of the systems are mentioned in your manual very short, others in more detail. And yeah, with the most of them, we'll talk quite a lot about it. So before we start with the skeletal system, are there any questions on the four basic cell types or anything that I said before? I just see a chat coming in. The endocannabinoid system. Well, maybe Tasha, at some point you can enlighten us a little bit on that, because it's not something that that I have learned a lot about. But yeah, very interesting. But it's at this moment It's not something that that is really like clearly out in any sort of anatomical like books or teachings, basically. But that doesn't mean that it's not that it's not there, and it's not something to maybe also work with. So yes, at some point it would be great if you have a little bit more info on us, or if you have some links that we can maybe look into. That would be amazing. Yeah, maybe to be added later. Yeah, for sure. If you can, yeah, I know that we are only spending a very short time together. More time you'll spend, of course, with Sarah. But I would love if you have some links on this. I would love that. Maybe you can share that in our WhatsApp group, because I'm always open to new information. And maybe in my next training, I can actually add a bit more information about that. So thank you. Okay, skeletal system. Now I need a little bit of your input as well. The question is, what do our bones do for us? And what do we know about bones? So for this one, please take a moment to write something in the chat. What do you know about bones? What do they do for us? Sam says they keep us from melting. Yes, they keep us upright. They give us support, a foundation. Carrie says they are very much alive. Yes, for sure. Our roots, yeah, hold us as complete. Yeah. Katara is saying they make hemoglobin to get us oxygen. So we make basically red blood cells are made inside the bones. I think that G. Odo is Edith. I think so. Edith is saying, keep all the muscles and cells together. Well, you can also say, what is keeping what together? Eh? That's also an interesting one here, but we'll discover that as we're going through it. Anything else? There's one thing that's quite important that I actually haven't seen yet. Just waiting a little bit longer, see if I get maybe another reply. They can't bend. No, I guess they can't bend. In general, they should be quite sturdy. They grow from the distal ends at the growth plates, Carrie says. Marrow, DNA, yeah, that's all. That's what also, I think Katara was saying that, where the hemoglobin or the red blood cells are created, and determine where we can bend because of joints. They have the ability to heal itself, Cassie says. Nice, yes. So movement, people, movement. Bones and bones make that we can move, and that's important, of course, for us, but not alone, of course. It needs the muscular system as well, but both those systems make that we can move. Yeah, let's go to the next slide. So what do we know about bones and what do they do for us? One more thing is coming into the chat. Stem cells, Tasha says, yeah. So they give us support, and they make us stable and mobile. We can move because of bones, movement, with help of the muscles. Protection, very, very, very important. I don't think anyone actually mentioned this, but that's also one of the most important and very big functions that, of course, the bones have, when you think about it. I mean, when you think about the brain inside the skull, and when you think about the spinal cord, that is completely protected by this dense tissue, by bones. And think about the rib cage and the lungs and how beautiful it actually is, because the ribs, they protect the lungs, but then there also has to be movement, because as we're breathing, it's constantly, there's this constant movement. The rib cage has to expand and also contract. So yes, protection. It protects our organs, our nervous system, really important. Of course, the production of blood cells in the bone marrow, and that is when you go into more detail into the red blood cells, the hemoglobin, that's actually what transports the oxygen. Also very important is it's the storage of different minerals, calcium and iron, for example. And basically why it's important also for that we have a lot of calcium is because calcium is the action signal for a muscle to contract. Now that goes really deep into physiology, but in general, when there's calcium released into the muscle, that's the signal for the muscle to contract. Also endocrine regulation, releasing hormones to regulate, for example, that calcium level in the blood. Also interesting, we have 206 bones in the whole body. And again, everybody is different. So somebody might be missing a bone here or there. In general, it doesn't happen so often that somebody is just out of nothing missing, like an arm bone or something. But it does happen more often that, for example, the small bones that we have in the wrist and in the foot, for example, in the ankle, you might not have all of them. In general, I think there are 8 or 9. And maybe you have 7, and that's also fine. You can still live. And then somebody else, I think it was Cassie that said this as well. Bones have their own blood supply and they can heal themselves. And that is very important. Why is this important? Because when a tissue has a blood supply, it means that nutrients can come to that place. So because bones have their own blood supply, nutrients can transport through our cardiovascular system and arrive at where, for example, there is a break in a bone, and it will start to heal itself in that sense. So when there's no blood supply, then it's very hard for tissue to heal itself. It's important that bones can heal because yes, they do break. And what is so beautiful again about the body is that when the body heals itself, when it heals a bone, when a bone heals itself, basically, that it actually becomes so much more stronger than it was before. So they say that basically you will never break a bone on the same spot twice. It can be around the same area, but not on that same spot, because instead of getting weaker, it actually gets stronger. It's this scar tissue of the bone is really making it super dense and strong. So this is showing you the skeleton. And I'm looking, and on page 8, you also have this in your manual. And you can see we have the axial skeleton, which is the skeleton that's most proximal, most close to the midline, talking about the skull and the spine, the ribs and the sacrum. And then we have the appendicular skeleton, and that is our arms and legs and part of the pelvis, the shoulder blades. And you can see we have, a lot of bones. And also, and you'll see that with muscles as well, we are very symmetrical. And also when you look at the bones of the arms and the legs, they are also very similar to each other. You can just see that, for example, of course, the fingers and the toes are different in length, but for the rest, you have the upper leg and the upper arm is one bone, and then there's 2 bones in that lower leg and lower arm. And the way the foot and the hand is structured is very similar. So we're very symmetrical. But again, remember, nobody is exactly the same. This is average. So part of the connective tissues, or part of the connective tissue, and we also say that it's part of the skeletal and muscular system, is ligaments, tendons, cartilage, and fascia. So that's what we call connective tissues. And I said it before, ligaments is what connects bone to bone. Tendons is what connects muscle to bone. Cartilage is, you can find in different places in the body, but it's this sort of softer material, softer tissue, and it's like a little bit of cushioning, and you have it also in your nose and your ears. And fascia is very interesting, something that I think a few years back, nobody would really give anything about fascia and not find very important at all. And now more and more, there's more study on how important actually fascia is. And that is actually part of a communication system of the body. And yeah, fascia is a really big topic. And I will talk a little bit about it in this training, but normally in my 50-hour yin yoga training, because we work so much on fascia in that training, I speak a lot about it, and it's super interesting. So the connective tissues, just so that you know, are the tissues that we work on during the yin yoga practice. And please let me know if any one of you doesn't know what yin yoga is, then please give me a shout in the chat, because I'd love to just very shortly explain it otherwise. And then during more yang style practices, so more dynamic styles of yoga, like Ashtanga, like Rocket, like Vinyasa, there, of course, we work much more on the muscles. But please never forget that the body cannot be isolated, and these tissues cannot be isolated. So even in yin, when you're working specifically on these connective tissues, it doesn't mean that you're not working on any of the other tissues, and that's vice versa as well. Just going to check in the chat for a moment. Yeah, Cassie is saying, please explain yin yoga. So I'll just do that very shortly. I think most of the people have in general, you could say the first experience that they have with yoga is a bit more dynamic. It's working on muscles. It's working like flowing on the breath, and it's more like a flowy style, or hatha or iyengar, of course, is a little bit different, but it's more active, so to say. It's more energizing. And then with yin yoga, we actually hold postures for longer amounts of time, and that is always a little bit like doubtful to say it like that, because in hatha you also have active, like young practices, young energy practices. I mean, in that sense, where you are actually holding postures quite long. I mean, in hatha they can hold a headstand for 8 minutes. So it's not completely fair to say short holds are more yang and long holds are more yin, but in general, in yin yoga, what the most important thing is we try not to engage into the muscles. We hold postures long, up say from 3 minutes to 5 minutes, but it can also be 8 minutes or 10 minutes. And we try not to engage into the muscles so that we actually work on the deeper layers. We bring a certain stress into these connective tissues, into the joints, and the body needs stress. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, I'm also going to talk about that a little bit later in the anatomy course. But the body needs stress. When the body doesn't have stress, it's basically deteriorating. So when you think about, we're placing stress on our muscles when we're doing more active yoga styles. So when we do yin yoga, they're mostly prone or supine postures or seated postures. So lying down on the floor or seated on the floor. You hold these poses for a fairly long time. We're bringing the body in a certain way, bringing pressure or a load or stress into the specific joints and onto the tissues around the joint, so ligaments, tendons, cartilage, fascia. And by bringing that stress, we stimulate the cells to become stronger. Yeah, so that is sort of what yin yoga is, in short. And Sarah is also saying we will address yin in week 3 and 4 also. So you'll also get a bit more knowledge about yin then also. Great. Let me see, what is the time? Yeah, just a little bit more. No, actually, I think it's nice for us to stop here, because it gives us a fresh start to begin from next week, where we can talk a little bit more, or not a little bit more, we're actually going to go into detail into the connective tissues. Let me just see for a moment. Yes, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And then, yeah, I'd like to know, please, and you're welcome to bring your video back on, just to know if there is any questions on the topics that I spoke about until now, or whether everything is clear. You can give me a thumbs up. Was the connection at the end pretty okay? Fingers crossed. Yes. Okay, that's amazing. Yeah, it's so annoying when you have the feeling that it's not completely stable. So that is beautiful. But any questions on the topics that we spoke about? Is it all clear? Is it a lot of how do you say, like for some is it a bit overwhelming, or am I going in the right pace? Also, it's also good to know for me. I don't see any like comments, so it means that it's all good. I expect that. Otherwise, just please let me know. And also in a text message or whatever via WhatsApp, you're always welcome to to say anything, or if there's any comments or anything, then please do let me know. Yes, then for now, I think I just want to say thank you. And Sarah, is there anything that you would like to say to these lovely people, or you're all good?
Really, thank you, Jane. Wonderful. In the end, the internet was fine and there were blips, but it was great. You did a wonderful job. So happy to be doing this with you. Everyone, I will see you at the studio at 11. Don't forget just to bring something to eat if you need it, snacks, water, that kind of thing. Dress comfortable. We will practice today, but I doubt you're going to sweat so hard you're going to need to take a shower or something like that. So if you forget a change of clothes or whatever, that's also okay. And otherwise, thank you, Jane, and I will see you all in a little bit.
Yay! So people, please enjoy the rest of your day, your first weekend of the teacher training, and indulge in it, take it all in, have a great time, and know that, again, what I mentioned before, it can also be via private message. Any questions on anatomy, please let me know. And also for the assignment, if throughout the week you're like, oh, what was it again? What do I need to do? Then just text me. Yeah, I'm always available via WhatsApp. It's an easy way to communicate for me. So great. Sarah. Anything you need?
I'll try to integrate some time so that to work on the assignment, I'll try to integrate some of that time into our hours together this weekend. So don't stress about it. We also have time in here to integrate some of that work.
And you can work in groups as well. With our teacher training, sometimes two people, they do it together and then they get their poses, and then at least you know that you have one pose each because you're doing two poses together as a team of two. So all good. Yes. Thank you so much. Have a beautiful day, beautiful training weekend, and I'm looking forward to seeing you next week already. Namaste. Thank you.